All right, let's bring in a couple of our NBA experts, Avery Johnson, the general, and James Herbert, who's out there covering Game 3 for us tonight in Boston at TD Garden. We're going to play a little opt-in or opt-out. James Harden, is he going to opt back in Philly? What's your take?
This is the safest bet, I think, among these guys. He will opt in. I don't think he's getting a contract starting at $47 million on the open market with his sort of inconsistent play over the course of the season. I think it's up for debate how his sort of offseason will end, right? Because they can negotiate an extension, but then it's a matter of, is he going to give something up in terms of the money or the years or both? Because I think the assumption that the Sixers are just going to max him out completely, that is not one anybody is making anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree with James. Daryl Morey traded for James Harden for a reason. He really believes in him more than probably half of the general managers in the NBA in terms of this stage of James Harden's career. So I agree with James. He's going to opt in, then extend probably short term for a lower number, more cap-friendly type of a deal. James, he just hasn't gotten back to his normal self. We show him dunking on this highlight. There was a stretch when he got traded. I don't even know if he dunked the basketball in a game. He just didn't show that athleticism, explosiveness, consistent scoring ability, especially in the playoffs. He had, one game where, he looked like the old James Harden. But again, I think he opts in and they'll talk about an extension, but I don't think he's going to get a maxed out deal at this stage of his career.
Maybe a contingency to the next contract. As long as you can get rim, you can still play for us. But if you can't touch the rim, it's no bueno. It's voided. Let's move on to Bradley Beal, who seems to have a lot more left in the tank. He's still young enough, James, and he's shown signs of being a potential superstar. What do you think he does?
I think he opts out. He's eligible to sign the big max, like $250 million deal to stay with the Wizards. All signs for a long time have been that will get done, that the Wizards are committed to him as the face of the franchise, that Beal would rather win there than win anywhere else. And just from a financial perspective, it would still make sense for him to opt out to re-sign, and then down the road, if he decides that he doesn't think he can win there, at that point, that is when today's superstar typically asks for a trade and tries to pick their next destination. The only thing that I think would derail this is if Washington gets cold feet about paying him that $250 million and gets worried about it. But that would be a radical departure from their stated plan and the plan that we've been able to observe over the past few years. I mean, we have been speculating about a potential divorce between Beal and the Wizards since before he even signed his last extension.
Yeah, I think he opts out, and I think Bradley Beal, even though it sounds good, similar to what's happening with Damian Lillard in Portland, where he says he wants to stay and make it work in Portland. A lot of my sources tell me that both of these guys would love a new address, a new home. I can see Bradley Beal potentially end up some kind of way in the Miami Heat uniform. Miami Heat, even though they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals Game 7, they still have concerns about Kyle Lowry. They have his health. They have concerns about Tyler Hero. Can he be a starter or just a guy that's going to be in that Sixth Man of the Year conversation? So I see him opting out and trying to figure out a way to force his way out of Washington, because look, Washington is still not one of the best 7 or 8 best teams in the Eastern Conference. Even if you re-sign Bradley Beal and you give him the max, you're still not a playoff team. You may be a play-in team, but you're not a playoff team. So I would look for Bradley Beal to potentially end up landing in another uniform after he opts out.
Well, let's talk about the team that was favored to win it all going into this season that vastly underperformed. The Brooklyn Nets and Kyrie Irving. Opt in or opt out for Kyrie, James?
I'll say opt out just because on a new contract, regardless of the length, he can make slightly more money than if he would just go ahead and sign an extension. But I think either way, he's going to end up sticking in Brooklyn. It's just a matter of whether or not he signs an extension on his current contract or if he signs an entirely new one. I would be shocked if he ended up signing for the full 5 years, staying. That would keep him with the Nets a year longer than Kevin Durant. I do not expect that, especially after everything that happened with Irving and the Nets last season. But I do think Irving wants some type of multi-year deal that sort of keeps him secure in this spot for longer than just opting in and playing it out. I think either way we will see a new deal with him and the Nets, whether that's an opt-out or an opt-in, but I would lean toward opting out because that just gives him a little bit more cash.
Yeah, I agree here. Opt out, stay with the Nets, probably sign a short-term deal. I don't think there's any way the Nets give Kyrie Irving a 5-year contract. Just hasn't been as dependable, whether it's from a health standpoint or, we understood his stance with the vaccination and the health and safety protocols. So I see them too many question marks. There's too many times, where he just didn't show up and he wasn't available. And your best ability is availability. So I say an opt out and maybe a 2-year contract at best. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just a 1-year deal at a higher number, and then they'll figure it out. I just think this is not going to be a long-term type of an extension with Kyrie Irving, short-term after an opt-out.
Nets were the favorites in the East. Lakers were the favorites in the West. Russell Westbrook. Now, James, fans would love him to opt out, but what are the chances that actually happens?
0? Less than 0? Can I say that? I mean, there's no incentive for Westbrook to do that unless he is just absolutely obsessed with the idea of playing somewhere else to the point where he would be happy to give up a significant amount of money. I don't think there's any way that happened. That does not guarantee that he will then be back in a Lakers uniform next season. But I'll also say that even if they do try to trade him after he opts in, there's not necessarily going to be a palatable deal for Los Angeles. That's why everything that you've heard publicly from the Lakers organization, including from their new coach Darvin Ham at his introductory press conference, is about keeping him in the fold, about trying to improve the team and the fit and make it work next season. That might be more for leverage purposes to make it seem like that's what they want, but the reality is they might not have a better option than that when they look at the trade market. It will cost them, whether it's young players, which they don't have a ton of them, or draft picks, which they don't have a ton of those either, if they want to get off of that deal at this point. So even though it was far from a perfect marriage in their first year together, I don't necessarily think they can get out of this marriage easily in this offseason.
It's pretty cool for me that I agree with my buddy James more than Bill Ryder. I agree with James here. This is an opt-in situation. The Lakers are handcuffed here. They don't have any other real options in terms of what to do with Westbrook. So this is an opt-in. Darvin Ham is going to challenge him to be more effective on a defensive end. He's going to challenge him to drive the ball more, limit his three-point attempts, and get back to being that explosive player that he was historically over his career. The only way you could potentially move Westbrook is if you include an Anthony Davis or you include draft picks, which I agree with James. They don't have many. And draft capital. So this is a simple opt-in, and they're going to have to make it work for a year. And I'm glad that Darvin Ham signed a pretty long-term contract. I heard he signed for about $45 million because this could be a long year for the Lakers, because this team, I don't know if they can get any faster or any younger, any more mobile or healthier. So he's going to have to live with Westbrook on this 1-year, $47 million deal.
$47 million cap hit for Russell Westbrook. The next guy we're talking about is about a $4.7 million cap hit, and that would be Bobby Portis with the Milwaukee Bucks. Opt in or opt out, James?
This is an opt-out. This is a simple one. This is kind of part of the deal last summer when he gave the Bucks a discount to return after winning a championship and becoming a folk hero and hearing the fans chant his name in Milwaukee. He decided he would take less than his market value to keep this thing going and try to win another title. The Bucks did not do that, but Portis still had a good year, actually ended up starting for the majority of it because of Brook Lopez's injury. And I think it makes sense for this relationship to continue. The Bucks have his early bird rights, which is a fancy way of saying they can pay him a little bit more than the mid-level exception, which is probably what other teams would be likely to offer him as an unrestricted free agent this summer. So that makes sense as a starting point for a new multi-year deal with Portis and the Bucks. It would be about $10.9 million as a starting salary. He made like $4.5 million this year. Again, playing at below market rate because he wanted to come back and play for that team.
Yeah, another great point here. I think this is a guy that's going to end up potentially playing his entire career with the Milwaukee Bucks. He loves this organization. He loves Coach Bud. Obviously, playing with Giannis and Middleton when he's healthy, Drew Holiday. And sometimes the grass is just not greener. Their colors are green. It's just not greener on the other side. This is a perfect fit for Bobby. They're going to invest quite a bit in him as he continues to grow and develop and stay with this organization. His game fits their system like a T. He's really become a reliable three-point shooter, hard-nosed, tough guy on defense. This is a team that could very well, we could hear their names back in the Eastern Conference Finals and the finals next year. They're not far off. So I think this is a perfect fit. Opt out, pay him a little bit more money, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, then he'll sign one of those real humongous deals.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.